Okay, before we get started, I just want to say I realized in the middle of rereading this series that Niven made it pretty clear in a couple ways that Louis, L-O-U-I-S, is actually supposed to be pronounced Louis.
Louis.
Now, as an American, I'd always read Louis as Louis.
Louis. Louis.
Louis.
Louis.
Because in my head, Louis is spelled like L-O-U-I-E. So I'm sure this has been driving some of you nuts, sorry about that, and I'm sure that's not my only name mispronunciation. Niven sure doesn't like making names easy on me, but I'm doing my best, so I hope you can forgive me when I do something silly like call the main character of the whole series the wrong name the entire time. But I figure it would be more confusing to start calling him Louis now in the last book than it would be to just keep owning it and calling him Louis, as he has been in my head since I was a kid. Okay, now on to the book. Louis once again awakens inside the autodock. The injuries Bran had given him were all healed. He emerged to find the autodock he was in spread out in pieces across the floor, still functioning perfectly, or else Louis would probably be dead. That was not all that was disassembled. Around him lay their ship, the Hot Needle of Inquiry, in two unequal pieces. Toonsmith had somehow figured out how to penetrate a general products hall, something that was thought to be impossible. Louis noticed that the edge of the ship, where it had been separated, seemed to have brass tape on all the sliced edges. Louis climbed up the larger half of the ship until he reached the hindmost's previously impenetrable cabin, now open to the air. In it he found the hindmost in a catatonic state, curled up in a ball. He spoke with the ship's computer to find that once again, he had been left in the autodock for longer than needed, at the whim of a protector. He couldn't help but wonder if he had traded one dangerous protector for another. The two city builders had been returned to their library. Acolyte was absent on a wild goose chase in the middle of nowhere that Toonsmith had sent him on. The hindmost was catatonic, and Toonsmith himself was seemingly busy with a project. Until suddenly, he wasn't. He was right in front of Louis, and already giving orders. He reattached the two halves of the Hot Needle of Inquiry, and introduced them to Hanuman, a protector made from a barely sentient hanging people species, tree dwellers. With an enormous magnetic mass driver beneath the map of Mars, Toonsmith launched Hanuman in a small ship, then had Louis, Acolyte, and hindmost board the Hot Needle of Inquiry, which he also launched with the mass driver. Above the Ringworld, a multi-sided Cold War was being waged. Every sentient species in the galaxy had an interest in the Ringworld, and two of the most aggressive of all the species in the galaxy were taking main stage, the Kzinti and the humans. The UN's Amalgamated Regional Militia, or ARM, had brought out their newest ships, antimatter-powered warships of all sizes, with antimatter weapons. It seemed they had discovered a whole star system that was made of antimatter, and had finally figured out how to mine it. Watch my video titled Crashlander if you want to hear how that happened. And the Kzinti would never back down from a fight, especially when the prize was something this valuable. The Cold War would soon get hot. It was just a matter of time. The Longshot was spotted, the only existing Hyperdrive 2 ship in the galaxy, able to travel light years in only minutes. This ship was originally built by the Puppeteers and flown by Beowulf Schaefer in the short story At the Core. Then it was given to Louis Wu and Speaker as a reward for their first Ringworld trip, who in turn gave it to both their governments equally. An agreement the Kzinti immediately broke and stole the Longshot for themselves. Since then, they had only been using it as a courier ship, able to bring messages and vital equipment faster than any other way. The Longshot was currently docked to the Kzin command ship on the opposite side of the star system from where the needle had been launched, and behind them, they were traveling away from it. Both the Kzinti and the ARM were firing at the needle, but Toonsmith, at the controls, was deftly avoiding them while following the small pod that Hanuman was in, until the pod blinked out of existence. There was no flash of light, no explosion, so Lewis came to the conclusion that Hanuman had activated his hyperdrive inside the star's singularity, committing suicide. He even asked Toonsmith what was the point of this, when suddenly, Hanuman's pod blinked back into existence far ahead. Lewis did not have the time to process the impossible thing he just saw when Toonsmith began reaching to activate the Needle's hyperdrive. Both Lewis and the hindmost shrieked at him to stop before he killed them all, but it was too late. Suddenly, they were in hyperspace, in the blind spot, where the human mind could not understand what it was seeing, so the brain just cut it out entirely, smearing walls and anything else in your sight to cover the missing parts. Only Lewis could see something. Strange purple smears. Then the universe popped back into existence, and they were somehow still alive. Lewis no longer knew what to believe. He just survived what he had always been told was certain death, something no other ship had ever done, save for Hanuman's. So Toonsmith came up with a theory that he would be able to navigate in hyperspace near stars for short bursts, and once he saw Hanuman prove his theory to work in practice, he immediately tried it himself. This got the Needle away from the attacking arm and Kzinti ships, and almost to the edge of the system, where they could stay in hyperdrive safely. Once they were there, they activated the hyperdrive and circled around the system in hyperspace. When a ship exits hyperspace, it carries the same velocity and trajectory as it did when it entered, regardless of any maneuvering the ship does while it's in hyperspace. This meant that once the Needle exited hyperspace, it would be heading towards the Longshot instead of away from it. Toonsmith exited hyperspace and the ship was on a collision course with the Longshot. He intercepted the Longshot and the command ship it was docked with. He then used his bronze glue, as he called it, to attach the Needle to the Longshot and then set his thrusters to full power. Since the Needle was on the outside of two bigger ships, this caused the three attached ships to start spinning faster and faster until the command ship broke free and was flung aside. Toonsmith continued to thrust until the Kzin and the Longshot would be unconscious from the G-forces of the spin. Toonsmith, Acolyte, and Lewis boarded the Longshot to find the crew still conscious. It seemed that much of what was inside the Longshot was put there by the puppeteers to either spy or just trick the owners into thinking there was no free space. They were willing to part with the hyperdrive, but they did not want to give the humans in Kzin fighter carriers that could travel faster than any signal to warn of them. But the Kzin had figured it out and had removed some of the superfluous machinery and used the space to install gravity generators like the Needle had, thereby making Toonsmith's spinning maneuver ineffective. Toonsmith then took control of the Longshot and gave command of the Needle to the hindmost, who immediately tried to escape back to his homeworlds, only to find that Toonsmith had somehow disabled the hyperdrive since they used it only moments before. This forced the hindmost to evade attacks all the way back to the safety of the Ringworld. Only it was not safe. Two armed ships followed them all the way to the surface, where the hindmost knew of a hole in the Ringworld floor. He flew through the hole to the outside, and then escaped into a broken, massive spill pipe. But now, the arm and the Kzin saw the hole and were trying to hold it against each other as an easy entry point to the Ringworld. But over the next few days, their maneuvering and threats kept escalating until an armed ship was blown up not far above the Ringworld. And when its antimatter drive collapsed, an explosion that would make a nuclear bomb look like a firecracker went off, tearing a hole in the Ringworld floor 60 to 70 miles across. And just like that, the Ringworld was doomed. All the air would rush out. The seas would boil and evaporate. The animals and people would suffocate, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The lucky ones had been killed in the blast. That is when Toonsmith flicked into the hiding Needle on a stepping disc. Of course he had hacked the system, just as Bran had done before him. But Toonsmith seemed to still have a plan. He rushed the team back to the map of Mars, where the massive magnetic linear accelerator was. He had reverse engineered the nanobots in the autodock and programmed them to repair the Skrith rather than a living being. With these, he launched a massive bubble with a linear accelerator that inflated on the way and plugged the hole in the Ringworld floor, temporarily giving time for the puncture to be sealed. While watching this, Lewis noticed a familiar-looking scar on the Ringworld floor. A ship inside a slaver stasis field had crashed as a result of the explosion, leaving a trail just like the Lying Bastard, the first ship that Nessus and Lewis and Speaker had taken to the Ringworld, had made when it crashed. Toonsmith had Acolyte, Hanneman, and Lewis go investigate the crash site. Here they ran into the crew of the Snail Darter, an armed fighter ship launched from a nearby carrier, and Weblith, a trader who had been staying at another species town, far too close to the explosion. It had blinded all of his hosts, and then the pressure drop of the Ringworld's atmosphere escaping through a massive hole suffocated them all to death, with Webleth being rescued by the Snail Darter only moments before he too would have suffocated. Lewis, in his 20-year-old body, seemed to be just a child to the armed crew, and Acolyte, despite his size, was only 12, so they claimed to be children of the previous crews. The Hanging People Protector Hanneman pretended to be just a normal, non-sentient monkey pet. The armed crew, seeing Lewis as a valuable intelligence resource, tried to abduct him, but when the ship tried to drop through the hole in the Ringworld, they crashed into invisible strands of Skrith, being woven back together by Toonsmith's nanobots, and had to jettison their escape pod to survive. This killed one of the 3 armed crew members, as Lewis was in his seat when they ejected the escape pod, due to them having restrained him there in the crash web to abduct him. They reunited with Hanuman, Acolyte, and Wembleth. The armed fighter crew contacted their carrier ship, but Lewis was unable to hear what was said. But it was soon clear. The 2 remaining armed crew suddenly pulled weapons on the rest, and a massive explosion went off not far from them. The armed carrier had blown another hole in the Ringworld floor and sent a ship through to recover the fighter crew, along with the others as sources of information. But in the chaos, Acolyte was able to kill the arm holding a gun on him and escaped. When Roxanne, the last arm agent, tried to shoot Acolyte as he escaped, Lewis attacked her and ended up being shot himself, shattering his hips and lower torso with the point-blank impact from her concussive gun. The next thing Lewis knew, he was on the carrier in its medical bay. It seemed that Acolyte had escaped, but the rest of them had been captured. But he was not there for long, before the carrier was attacked and invaded by unfamiliar Spill Mountain protectors. They quickly invaded the ship and took both Lewis and the military autodock he was connected to, as well as Roxanne, Wembleth, and Hanuman. The Spill Mountain protectors were under the command of another protector, but it was not Toonsmith. They took Lewis and his companions to the other great ocean. In one is the map of Earth, Mars, Xen, and other inhabited worlds. In this one, however, there was the same planet stamped over and over in the ocean. It looked to be severely cratered. It was not long before Lewis came to the realization that this was the Pack homeworld that had been repeated dozens of times, the creators of the Ringworld's home planet. They soon come to find out that this new protector's name is Proerpina, and she claims she was one of the original Pack that built the Ringworld. Originally, there were 10,000 Pack that decided to move to a new star system. By the time they were ready to launch, they were down to 600. These 600 flew out of the central part of the galaxy, seeing failed Pack colony worlds along the way. They were not the first to try this, but every other previous colony attempt had been destroyed by other Pack before the planet could be terraformed and colonized. Again and again they saw the husks of failed worlds. It was too easy to kill those on another planet. But there was one colony world that had survived, and it had only failed because of a lack of Tree of Life fruit. So they would go in that direction. Not to that planet, but close enough to that region of space that it should be safe. Here they found a strange star system. A massive gas giant had been in a decaying orbit, starting far out in orbit and slowly getting closer and closer to its star. Along the way, it had sucked up every other bit of solid matter in the system, and now it was very close to its star with a mass many times that of Jupiter's. The 600 pack decided to turn this system into a Ringworld, using the mass of the gas giant to create it. But they had rules. The Ringworld would be too delicate for large-scale wars, so no pack was allowed to be around its descendants. Any that broke that rule would be banished to one of the copies of the pack worlds in the Great Ocean. Proerpina was one of these rule breakers, and she had been stranded on one of the maps ever since. They gave her a few of her own lineage on the map with her. This forced her to spend all of her time and energy collecting them from across a world-sized map, create a living habitat for them, protect them, and bring them all together to breed. They made this task as difficult as possible for her, so it would absorb all her time for as long as possible. And it worked. She was able to bring her breeders to a stable population level with enough security to ensure their survival even without her intervention. But by then she had been out of the loop for so long that all she knew was what she could see with her telescopes. If she had made ships to leave, they would have been shot down, and her breeders may have been punished. If she caused too much trouble, the other pack builders may have once again decimated her lineage, forcing her to start over. She could not take that chance. So she watched and waited. And as she continued to see punctures in the Ringworld be repaired, and threatening comets and asteroids being shot down, she knew the other pack were still ruling the Ringworld. She could rest assured in that while watching over her flock. At one point, she gave Tree of Life to her breeders and tried to create an army. But the other pack had control of the Ringworld itself, and her rebellion was quickly put down, once again leaving only her. After this, the other pack neutered her Tree of Life virus so that it could not create any more protectors. But one day she looked into her telescopes and saw problems that were not being tended to. She could see ice storms, the result of atmosphere leaking out of the Ringworld floor. She could see spill mountains that had shrunk to almost nothing as the pipes that fed them failed. She could see deserts and even bare patches of skrith, the Ringworld foundation material. Something was wrong. And then the alien ships came, and she had to take action. She began to hack information networks and gather as much data as she could. That's how she learned of the abduction of Lewis and his company. She knew they were valuable, not just as sources of information, but as a connection to Tounith, who was the current ruler of the Ringworld Repair Center, where the Ringworld itself could be commanded. This is the point in the story where Lewis's luck seems to rival or even be better than that of Tila's. For as Proerpina and Tounith talk, Lewis makes his way into an ancient pack protector arcology on one of the maps of the pack homeworlds where Proerpina had left him. Lewis, Roxanne, and Wembleth enter on a fly cycle shortly after one of Tounith's probes had entered the building. It had created an opening and disarmed all of the traps on the way. Lewis followed this path of destruction. They find Tounith's wrecked probe, right as the last of the defenses burnt out trying to attack it. The probe is made up of just a stack of floating cargo plates topped with a stepping disc. So seeing their way out, they decide to use the stepping disc to escape Proerpina. But Roxanne pushes Lewis off the fly cycle. She had realized who he was. He was not some 20-year-old kid born on the Ringworld as he claimed. He was Lewis Wu, the only known explorer of the Ringworld, somehow made younger. And she did not trust a man known to work for aliens and who had been lying to her. So she and Wembleth disappeared into the stepping disc, and Lewis, on foot, could not reach it to follow. He would die of thirst if he did not find water, and far above him, inside the arcology, he saw plants growing. There must be an automated hydroponics garden in this long abandoned building. It would have water, so he made his way up. But as he approached the garden, he caught a smell of something beyond enticing, something heavenly that triggered ancient instincts in him. And the next thing he knew, he was gorging on Tree of Life root. But even as he stuffed his face, he knew this was wrong. He was only 20 biologically. The smell of Tree of Life shouldn't even affect him. Then he remembered he had spent months in the autodock. Tounith must have reworked it to change his DNA and make him, despite looking young, have the genes of an older person, allowing the Tree of Life virus to work on him. But unfortunately, Lewis had still not healed fully from when Roxanne shot him, and when he awoke as a protector, he was crippled and malformed around his shattered hips. His mind was more powerful than ever, but his body could not compete with another protector's. He immediately started to make plans. He hacked the stepping disc system and went to the Hot Needle of Inquiry to speak with the hindmost. Then he found Roxanne and Wembleth, and with his new nose, he could instantly tell what Wembleth truly was. Roxanne was pregnant. He let them know who he was, and Roxanne said that he was the father. He agreed, but not the father of the child in her belly. He was Wembleth's father, and the child was Wembleth's, because Roxanne and Wembleth were of the same species. They were both from Earth. It seemed that Tila had been pregnant with Lewis's baby when she left with Seeker, and that child was Wembleth. So Wembleth was Lewis's son, and Roxanne was pregnant with his grandson, and he was a protector, forced by instinct to place his lineage above all else on the Ringworld, or the entire galaxy for that matter. But Tounith had wanted to turn Lewis to a protector for a couple of reasons, but one of the most important of which was that Lewis would be a childless protector, meaning that he had nobody to betray Tounith for. But now he did. So with that knowledge, he went back to Tounith and Proerpina, who were now working together to defend the Ringworld. He joined them to help. He told them the truth, that the Fringe War would soon become the Ringworld War at any moment. They must act now. Then he purposefully let it slip that Tila had his son. Proerpina and Tounith instantly understood what this meant and tried to attack him, but he escaped. This made them believe that after seeing how volatile the Ringworld situation was, he escaped to protect his lineage, when in reality, he wanted only two things: the Ringworld to survive and to become a human again. So his escape forced Tounith to play his hand, and while he prepared, Lewis took the Carlos Wu nanotech autodock and put it inside the long shot. He then activated the hyperdrive and floated through the floor of the Ringworld itself to escape. From a safe orbit, he watched the Ringworld disappear into hyperspace, then crawled into the autodock so that it could restore his body to a human one. So with just himself and the hindmost, he took the long shot back to human space. Okay, so I kind of feel like it fell apart there at the end a little bit. When Wembleth is drugged on the carrier, Lewis overhears him saying that he has brothers. But how is that possible if Tila and Seeker were different species of humans? I could see two closely related Ringworld species being able to interbreed, like ring species. Wait, that sounds confusing. So here on Earth, in reality, there are these species that can interbreed, and they are called ring species. I'll put some information on them on the screen. You can pause it if you're interested. But basically, it's just when one species evolves to a new area, and then that one evolves to a new area, so now there are three species. But species A can procreate with species B, and species B can procreate with species C. But if species A mated with species C, they could not produce offspring. That's the simplified version. Kind of fitting for the Ringworld, I must say. So it makes sense that some Ringworld species can breed with others closely related to them. But Earth humans and Ringworld humans had been separated for far too long. Tila and Seeker should not have been able to make kids. And there is a scene where Lewis explains that after Tila became a protector in the arcology, she pretended to change again when she found the map of Mars in an attempt to trick Bram into coming close so she could kill him. And it did not work because Bram just left her. So why would Bram just ignore her? And how is it a smart move to lay naked on the ground in your enemy's house pretending to be asleep? Couldn't he just have shot her from a distance? I don't see how you could get the element of surprise in that way. And why would she care if Bram thought her mate was dead? How would he even know she had a mate? So why would she bring a random old man to die after eating the Tree of Life? And what are the chances that on something as huge as the Ringworld, Lewis would find Tila's skirt in the exact place she turned into a protector, as he did? These all seem like pretty clear retcons to me. But if you disagree and maybe have an answer as to why all this happens, I'm all ears. Please leave it in the comments, because it's kind of sad to me that such a great series ends on such a wishy-washy note. Maybe if you have a good enough theory, I'll even make a video out of it and give you the credit. But even if I don't do that, it would still be nice to have this series end on a more logical footing, so I would really appreciate it for my own sanity. Hey, thanks for watching. I really appreciate you staying this long, and since you did, hopefully that means you like my channel. So I'd really appreciate it if you would like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe, so I can see you back here for the next one. Take care.